Chapter 7. A crash woke me that night. At least, I thought it was a crash. A real sound, not something I had dreamed or imagined. Being on the island, isolated, with no one to talk to for days and days, had made the line between things that were real and things that were imagined pretty thin. I felt jumpy and on edge. I remember dreaming of a rescue party, soldiers wearing high-tech armor and carrying enough firepower to make sure we'd all get out alive, like something out of a comic book or a movie. They kicked down doors and fried dinosaurs. They made a lot of noise. I didn't go right away to check out the crash that woke me. I waited for a long time where it was safe. No other noises came, but my nerves wouldn't settle down. I started thinking, what if a rescue party did come? Would they use bullhorns and spotlights and make the kind of noise that would attract dinosaurs? It would make more sense to be quiet, stealthy, to make noise only by accident. They were human. They could screw up just like I had. I started picturing rescuers going from room to room, not finding me, and taking off. "We better change that sign on the roof to 'Eric was here,'" a rescuer would say. "Dinos must have got him." I got off the couch and quietly removed the barricades from the door. Then I strapped on a tool belt I'd loaded up with things I could use as weapons and went into the hall. I didn't need the pen light I carried. The sun was rising, and an orange haze filtered in through the high barred windows. After passing a couple empty offices, I went through the rec room. I nearly stumbled over some free weights. I checked half a dozen closets. Finally, I found what had made the noise. I shined my pen light on the floor of one of the offices with boarded windows. I saw books and paperweights. A bookshelf had collapsed. "Jeez," I said. A voice called. "Yeah!" I yelled, falling back and shining my pen light. I scanned the dark room and saw scales and claws. A deep growl sounded as my light struck black dinosaur eyes. A scaly arm swung out, and another crash came as books, printouts, and a globe smashed to the floor. I had my back to the doorway. All I had to do was leap back and I could make it to the hall. But what if the dinosaur wasn't alone? I risked a glance behind me and saw nothing, but I heard the dinosaur in the office rush my way. I reached for the door and tried to yank it closed, but the dinosaur was too fast for me. The door banged on its foot and a claw swiped at the air. Jumping back, I dodged the claw and lost my balance. Falling, I snatched a heavy wrench from my tool belt and brought it around. Then I dropped onto my backside, my hands shaking, my breathing hard. The dinosaur turned its back and started thrashing the office for real. Within seconds, it reached the window and punched through the boards I had nailed in place. Orange sunlight fell on the dinosaur, and I saw that it was the iguanodon who had helped me avoid becoming raptor chow in the parking lot. "What's going on, Iggy?" I asked. "What did I do, lock you in here with me?" Iggy ignored me. He just continued thrashing about, hopping up and down, kicking wildly and kind of wobbling. An overturned container of quick-dry glue sat on the edge of the desk, and a puddle had formed on the floor. In its center was an inhuman footprint. Stomp! Stomp! Crash! Iggy had a book glued to his foot. He kept wobbling because he couldn't stand upright. I laughed and started to relax. In a way, I was kind of grateful for the distraction, and I knew a way of making the dinosaur happy, if I could get him to go where I wanted. The first thing I had to do was get that book off his foot. It was a paperback. I didn't recognize it. Not at first. Then Iggy flopped to the floor and started kicking like a rocket. I had to duck as the back cover stayed stuck on his foot and the rest of the book tore free and flew at me. It hit the wall, and I looked away from Iggy long enough to see the name Alan Grant upside down. Dr. Grant's book, the first one, the one he'd written before coming to Jurassic Park. I put the wrench away and picked up the book. It made sense that many of the people working here would have had Dr. Grant's book on their shelves, but I was still surprised. It was one of my favorite books about dinosaurs. I tucked the book into my waistband and looked back at Iggy, who had gotten over his tantrum and now looked like he was sulking. For a second, I was tempted to go right up to him and lead him out of the room the way I might have with Gray, my dad's dog, but I had learned enough about dinosaurs to know that would be a bad idea. Just because Iggy was a plant eater and just because he saved my life once didn't mean he wouldn't slam me into a wall or break half my ribs if I did something to tick him off, and we were both edgy enough as it was. I had to do something about him, though. It was a short trip to the food store. I brought back a couple of soy patties and left a trail of crumbs for Iggy to follow. Before I had gotten to the door of the storage room, Iggy was there, anxiously patting my way. I hugged the wall as he chuffed and raced into the room, attacking the food supply as if he were in heaven, which I guess he was. The sun was all the way up by the time I got Iggy squared away. All I wanted to do was stuff myself with junk food and sit down with Dr. Grant's book. It was the book that had gotten me seriously interested in dinosaurs in the first place, and it was one thing that I was pretty sure would take my mind off my situation. I got breakfast and sat down in the rec room. I hadn't read more than a couple pages when I saw I had almost tripped on those free weights because they'd been moved. Iggy again, I thought. I put the book in my waistband and shoved the weights back in place. As I put them back, I noticed that the edge of the rug had been clawed a little. I pulled at one corner and found a handle for a small hatch. The handle squeaked as I yanked on it with my right arm, which was still a little sore from what happened with the ankylosaurus. A little hideaway was revealed. It was mostly empty, but jammed into one corner was a pair of rollerblades with a tag that said confiscated. I pulled out the blades and tried them on. Eddie had a pair like this, and he used to let me practice with them. My dad wouldn't let me have my own. He said it was too dangerous. Of course, my dad hadn't known half the stuff me and Eddie were doing, though my mom finally figured it out. Eddie went to juvie and said I had just been walking by that night we trashed Deputy Tompkins' car. My mom said it was one of the reasons I had to be taken out of Enid. Too much energy. Energy. Yeah, right. And my energy became just one more excuse for my parents to keep fighting. Neither one of them had any idea why I was doing all that stuff. Maybe I didn't either. But they were the adults. Shouldn't they have figured it out? Seen how angry I was? But they didn't. They just didn't notice. I stood up and stretched, yawning really loudly. My yawn was met by a pair of growls, one from the right, the other from the left. The room turned to ice. I was finally being noticed. A pair of raptors were in the rec room with me.